Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we welcome you to this meeting of the Haltom City Council on June 13th, 2005. We are glad to see all of you who are here in the audience with us tonight, and we welcome those who are watching on HCTV. We begin our council meeting tonight with an invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Council Member Chris Holcomb. If you will, stand.
Dear Heavenly Father, we bow our heads humbly before you this evening to ask that you place your hands on each and every one of us here tonight, that we may have the strength, the wisdom to stand up for what we know is right, no matter what the subject. Father, please remind us as well to keep our hearts and ears open, to listen attentively so that we can understand the needs of our citizens here tonight. Pray that you will follow us as we go through the remainder of this evening. Forgive us where we fail you, for it is in your name we ask it all. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to begin by making just a couple of announcements. Councilmember Dale Clark is not with us tonight. He is a public safety officer at DFW Airport, and this is one of those nights he's not able to attend, wasn't able to get away. So we're sorry he's not able to be here, but we appreciate what he's doing instead of being here. Also, I want to remind everyone, if you'd like to address the council tonight on any item, we do need you to fill out one of these yellow cards. They are in a rack just outside the door. If you will, fill one of those out and hand it to either end of the dais, and we'll be ready to recognize you when we get to that item on the agenda. Items 7, 8, and 9 will not require a speaker's request card because these are public hearings, and all the members of the audience will have an opportunity to address the council at that time. I believe we're ready for announcements and events. Mr. Muir.
Thank you. We're going to start with our Public Information Coordinator, Fran Burns, with a couple of announcements.
Thank you very much. This Thursday, June 16th, is the final concert in our Concert in the Park series. It will feature the Texas Trail Hands. They start at 7 o'clock, Haltom Road Park. It's free and open to everyone. And we're trying something a little bit different for this last concert. We're going to have an opening act at 6:15. Burl Welch, who's a harmonica player, and he's really excellent, is going to open for the Trail Hands. So please come out and bring your picnic blankets and folding chairs and just enjoy the concert. It's just a very relaxing way to spend an evening. Secondly, I wanted to point out to everyone that the summer reading program at the library is underway, and this is a wonderful program. It's been going on for years, and I think it gets better each year. For the second year in a row, the program from the Haltom City Library is doing something a little different from other libraries. They have an outreach program. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they go to two of our local parks and have activities there for the kids that can't get to the library. The library goes to them. Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock, it's at Pecan Park, and Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock, it's at Buffalo Ridge Park. And then, of course, they have their special programs at the library at 2 o'clock on Fridays. And the next one on June the 17th is storyteller Esther Malone, 2 o'clock at the library. All these programs, of course, are free as well. The seniors are planning a couple of special programs this week. Tomorrow is June 14th is Flag Day. And in observance of this special day, the seniors are having a program at 11 o'clock at the Senior Center, which is at 5000 Bernice Street. And then on Friday the 17th, because Father's Day is coming up on Sunday, they're going to have a special program at 11 o'clock at the Senior Center honoring fathers. On July the 4th, the city will partner with several other entities in Northeast Tarrant County in putting on a fireworks display next to the Birdville Stadium, the old Birdville Stadium here in Haltom City. The fireworks will be set off in the soccer fields next to the old Richland Plaza. They're scheduled to begin at 9:30. Recommend you get there a little early. There should be a lot of people coming, and this, of course, is free as well, and it should be a dynamic show. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bennett Howell, our city engineer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Just wanted to inform y'all that we got notification today from Tarrant County that we have had a positive result on West Nile virus on a mosquito. It was at the Cypress Street drainage outlet, and at this point, the city is ready to begin spraying and put out larvicide. However, these treatment techniques are weather dependent, so with the impending rain and the wind, the city has to wait till the weather clears up. So until then, we recommend that the residents follow wearing proper clothing, also keep any stagnant water around their house out and away, cut their grass, that kind of thing. But we should be ready in a day or so when the weather and the wind die down, and we will begin spraying that area. The city has also started, in conjunction with Tarrant County, to place gambia minnows in stagnant water as a predatory technique to eat the larva. So that should also help. Any questions?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions, and for the sake of those of you in the audience and those watching on TV, I don't believe we introduced this speaker. This is our city engineer, Bennett Howell. Councilmember Sutton, and then Councilmember Holcomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the Gambia minnows are the same type of program that Dallas and Austin and other cities around the state have implemented in order to fight the mosquito population in a more economic, or not economic, but environmentally safe manner, from what I understand. And also understand that Tarrant County, this is one of their initiatives to help the cities. Is that true?
Correct. We are in partnership with Tarrant County on that program.
Okay.
They provide the city with the minnows, and we deploy them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Holcomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Understanding that Cypress is at the far south end of town, just curious, do we know how many other locations that they have traps, or what the closest trap would be, and how often the tests are taken?
The tests, it's my understanding, now that there have been a positive, they will collect more tests and a much often frequency, but at that point, I don't know. And they set traps anywhere there's the possibility of the stagnant water and heavy growth, that sort of thing, that's like in that area. Yes. We've got traps set out all over the city at this point.
I don't want to downgrade the threat at all, but we have had not had nearly as wet a spring as we've had in the last couple of years. So the threat should not be as significant as it's been in the past, but it's still something we take very seriously. And we're active with the larvicide, and we're active with the minnows, and the spraying. You don't really want to spray in the spring anyways; it's going to wash away with the rain you get. So you really want to spray later, but with the high winds, you can't do that either. So it takes a while to do all that. But I don't think the concern is as prevalent as it was in the past few years because of the dryness that we've had, which is a good thing.
Any further questions for Mr. Howell? Thank you, Mr. Howell. Any further announcements, Mr. Muir? Okay, we move now to the consent agenda. And if you're following along on your printed copy, that's items 1 through 6. The consent agenda is considered to be self-explanatory and will be enacted by the council with one motion. Approval of the consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each of these items in accordance with the staff of the board recommendations. What is the pleasure of the council regarding consent agenda? Councilmember Lanford?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Councilmember Holcomb?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. If you will, register your vote, and I will display it at this time. Okay. that does pass by unanimous vote of the council. We move now to item number 7, 8, and 9, and we'll do those one at a time. These are public hearings, and to introduce the first of these, item number 7, first reading of an ordinance, our planning director, James Pliska.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, citizens of Haltom City. This first item is zoning ordinance for a rezone, and it is first reading, and its consideration and/or action regarding the public hearing for Mr. Keith Glenn on behalf of John P. Davis for the rezoning of tracts 4, 4D, and 4B of the J. Elliston Survey, Abstract 472, from the single-family residential district to the office district located on the south side of Broadway Avenue. It's also locally known as 4210 Broadway Avenue. The site is zoned SF2 single-family residential. The applicant is requesting a zoning change from the SF2 single-family residential district to the office district in order to expand his business office to the site and bring the property in compliance with the city's zoning ordinance. The zoning change will not require an amendment to the city's land use plan. The comprehensive land use plan shows this as commercial. At their meeting on May 10th, 2005, the P&Z Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of this zoning change request from the SF2 single-family residential district to the office district and bring this to the City Council. I formally submit the ordinance to do such, and also Exhibit A, which is the survey accompanying this ordinance indicating the property in question.
Questions for Mr. Pliska from any elected official? Thank you, Mr. Pliska.
Thank you, Chair.
There may be questions raised by the audience, but since this is a public hearing, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Do we have anybody in the audience who wishes to speak either for or against this proposed ordinance? Okay, there being none, I close the public hearing, and we move now to action by the council regarding this first reading of this ordinance. Councilmember Lanford.
Move to approve Z00205 on first reading.
Councilmember Bransom.
Second, Mayor.
Have a motion and a second to approve on first reading. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Okay, if you will, register your vote. And it passes by unanimous vote. Item number 8 is a final plat. Mr. Pliska, would you like to introduce this one?
Thank you, Mayor. And again, this is the 14th plat of 05, and it is a replat of residential property, therefore the need for a public hearing. And we are here to conduct a public hearing regarding the application of Mr. Ernest Hedgecock, Consulting Engineers, on behalf of Mr. James Rust, for the final plat of lots 12R and 13R, Block 1, Stokes Heights Edition, being a replat of a portion of lots 12 and 13, Block 1. This is located in the SF2 single-family residential district and is located on the east side of Ray Drive, and it contains approximately 0.4452 acres of land, and both are locally known as 3132 and 3128 Ray Drive. The plat was recommended for approval to the City Council by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting of May 24, 2005. At the pre-council, we discussed the need for this plat was the relocation of a lot line due to an existing utility structure, but also to vacate a pipeline easement located on Lot 12, therefore allowing for construction of a new home. Therefore, I formally submit 11 by 17 reduced copy of said plat for your view and approval.
Before I open the public hearing, do we have any questions by members of the council? I believe there are none. Thank you, Mr. Pliska. I open the public hearing at this time. Mr. Hedgecock, you have a presentation to make to us tonight. You are the consulting engineer on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Ernest Hedgecock, consulting engineer for Mr. Rust in this final plat of the Stokes Edition, Lot 13, 12 and 13. And as Mr. Pliska mentioned, the purpose for this was to allow the existing structure that's on Lot 13 to remain. There's a little workshop that had been built and added on to the house, but it had gone across the property line. So in order to keep from having to tear that one down, we just moved the lot line over about 5 feet. And then also in connection with that, in order to eliminate this pipeline that goes across Lot 12, we contacted the pipeline company and with a little assistance and some money, they were more than happy to abandon the pipeline. It had been abandoned for years. There was not an active pipeline, but they were just abandoning it from the east to the west, and they were not even close to our property. It was going to be probably next year before they got over here. So we just asked them if they couldn't abandon it quicker, and for $1,000 they were glad to do it. So anyway, we abandoned the pipeline, so it's no longer there. Mr. Rust has built a house on that property now, and it's about ready for sale, or may already be sold by now. But as soon as we get the plat approved, we'll be ready to go. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. This was just an existing piece of property.
Any questions for Mr. Hedgecock? Councilmember Sutton?
Thank you, Mayor. Back in pre-council, we talked a little bit about this, but I just wanted to ask a more pointed question here. Do you feel in your engineering expertise that there is any safety considerations of leaving the pipe down there without filling it in? Whenever we talk about abandoned, what I understand the abandoned to mean is that the pipeline will remain underneath the ground, but it won't be filled in or excavated out. So are there any safety considerations that we as a city need to know about down the road that could result out of this?
No, sir, there's not. Not to my professional knowledge. There's nothing been in this pipeline for years. It's been abandoned for several years, and there's nothing in it, and there's no danger of anything causing any problems.
Okay, and the second thing is okay, no safety, but is any of the structure of the house going to be located over the pipeline itself?
Yes, sir.
Will any of the weight of the foundation or the house or anything like that cause buckling of the pipe in time, which would cause foundation problems?
No, the foundation will stand on itself. The grade beams are structured and designed that they will support across the pipeline, and there won't be any actual loading put on. The pipeline is
Right.
only a small pipeline.
Right.
There's a 50-foot right of way there, but the pipeline doesn't
Right.
cover that. It's only about a 10-inch pipeline, and the house covers completely across it. So there's no danger that if the pipeline was to collapse, that the house would have any structural damage on it.
Okay, great. You realize I just have to
Yeah, I
ask that,
understand.
and I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else with a question for Mr. Hedgecock? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak either for or against this final plat? Okay, there being none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll move then to receive a motion regarding the wishes of the council on this final plat. Councilmember Sutton?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve final plat number P-014-05.
Councilmember Hutchison?
That would be a second.
Have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Okay, there being none, if you'll register your vote. And it is a unanimous vote for approval. Item number 9, final plat number P015-05. To introduce this item, Mr. Pliska.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is a replat of residential property, therefore the need for a public hearing. This is to conduct a public hearing regarding the application, again, of Mr. Ernest Hedgecock, Consulting Engineers, again on behalf of Mr. James Russ, for the final plats of lots 16CR1 and 16CR2, Block 1, G.W. Burkett subdivision, being a replat of a portion of Lot 16, Block 1, G.W. Burkett subdivision, in the SF2 single-family residential district located on the north side of Rusty Dale, containing approximately 0.3651 acres of land and located in the 4,000 block of Rusty Dale. The plat was recommended for approval to the City Council by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting of May 24, 2005. As I discussed in the pre-hearing, there was some miscommunication in the letters of 200-foot notification instruments to the property owners. That letter addressed a 7:30 meeting. Planning and Zoning convened at 7 due to work on the ordinances and they've been stuck on the sign ordinance, basically. So we had the public hearing out here at 7, and we were back here at 7:30 when 2 individuals from Rusty Dale did appear and were concerned about the process. I did explain to them that we would have this meeting, this public hearing, and they would be given their chance to further look into this project or speak out either in favor or against during the public hearing process. So I do want to make note that there was some miscommunication on those letters of instrument that were sent out indicating a difference in the meeting times. However, P&Z was here at the time they were approached by the citizens. Again, therefore, I submit the 11/17 final plat for your approval and review.
Questions or comments for Mr. Pliska, members of the council? Okay, there being none, I'll open the public hearing at this time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Hedgecock, you have some information on this final plat, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir, I'm Ernest Hedgecock again, and I do represent Mr. Rust in this plat. I don't remember if James mentioned, but this property was platted, it was platted as Lot 16 in 1914 in the city of Fort Worth, Tarrant County. And if you look on the final plat for 1914, there is no Rusty Dale, there's no Higgins Lane, there's none of these streets or Earl Street, none of those are there. And I could not find where they got platted or how those streets got in there, but they're existing. What we've done here is we've taken a lot that has been split up into about 4 different tracts over the period of time, and we've made 2 lots out of it that meet the city's subdivision ordinance. They're both over 7,000 square feet, and Mr. Rust is planning to construct 2 houses on those, which will be about 2,000 square foot of give you a little idea of what they look like. They're about approximately 2,000 square feet in total foundation, and living area is about 1,800, I think, something like that. And there'll be 2 of them like that, and the sale price is around $150,000, which will be comparable to the area, and we feel like it'll be a real addition to the neighborhood, and will not have any kind of downside effect on anything. And we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Hedgecock? Okay, there being none, thank you, Mr. Hedgecock. I'll open the public hearing at this time and allow members of the audience the opportunity to speak either for or against this final plat request. Do we have anyone who wishes? Yes, if you will, come forward to the microphone, give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Glenda Smith. I live at 1809 Higgins Lane, Haltom City. You want me to go on?
Yeah,
okay. We, up and down Rusty Dale, we all get along real well together over in that neighborhood. And we have talked about the single-family dwellings. We have some houses there that have 4 or 5 families living in them, which are single families. We are very concerned about this happening, especially to that size of a home. The property that butts up to it, which also is 1813 Higgins Lane, has at least 4 families living in that. And where are they going to park their cars? There's no room for cars. One of the houses, the furthest one, west, will have no place to park a car because the people directly across the street from that one has 4 cars of their own, and they have 4 families living in that little house there. And we have a great concern about all of this and the kids running up and down the street, playing in the street after 12 and 1 o'clock at night. We're concerned about the children. We have one that has a small child, about 2 years old, and we take the child home a lot of the times because he's out running the neighborhood. And we just feel like that we really need some kind of something on that to protect the children and protect the other people in the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. And if you will, wait just a moment. Let me see if any member of the council has a question or comment for you.
Okay.
Councilmember Sutton?
First of all, thanks for coming. Thanks for taking part in this process. I appreciate you being here. Would the building of this house, what I heard you say is that the building of this house would maybe help perpetrate this idea of multiple families living in a house. Would there be something better to do with this property that would help in this situation that you've got in mind?
Rather than 2 houses on that one piece of property, they're going to be so close together, they're not going to have any yard. They're not going to have the way that they have the one laid out there now. There's no yard. There's no place to park. They have children where they're going to play besides the street.
I see.
And it is a great concern of all of us because you end up, I realize how expensive the house is. All of our houses are old homes, but they've all been reconditioned and remodeled, and they're well maintained. And we're concerned for the children and the parking area because I know the people across the street, directly from the one that they have laid out now, has 4 cars, and most of the time there's 6 there.
Okay.
And they park on that side of the street, plus in front of their house.
So am I hearing correctly to say that it would be better to, instead of having 2 houses on this property, have just 1 house?
Correct.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else on the council with a question? Okay, yes, Councilmember Lanford.
Question for the city attorney. James mentioned a while ago that there was a mistake in the letter that went out advising of the P&Z meeting on the time that that they were meeting, and my question is, does that fact endanger any action that we take tonight? Is it subject to? I mean, could a citizen complain about that because they didn't get sufficient notification or something like that?
Improper notice is something that is challengeable. People are entitled under the state law to a certain notice, and if we fail to give proper notice, if they can show that they were affected by the failure to get proper notice, then that is a right that they have to challenge actions that were taken. Mr. Pliska informed me that he did talk to the people who showed up at 7:30, and I think Mr. Pliska explained the situation that the meeting actually began an hour earlier than it might normally begin because of other items on the agenda, and people came at 7:30, and unfortunately the Planning and Zoning Commission had already concluded the public hearing, and Mr. Pliska informed the 2 people that showed up to come tonight to talk to the City Council because this body tonight has the final say-so on this. And in that regard, we hope that anybody who is interested in this plat will come tonight, did come tonight, and will speak to this matter, and the City Council certainly should take their comments into consideration in making its decision. And hopefully that will give them adequate opportunity to present whatever concerns that they have in this regard. Notice is always an issue. Got to be concerned about it. Is it fatal in this case? Probably not. But if we wanted to start the whole process over, we could. The question is, will that afford the citizens any greater opportunity to present their issues than they have tonight to be here?
Well, let me just ask another question. Is it too late to make it bulletproof on notice, or are we just down a risky path?
Well, since you've raised the issue, let's talk a little bit. We are looking at a final plat tonight, a replat of property, and as you know from having served on that board, when the Planning and Zoning Commission considers plats, they are looking at what's known as a ministerial duty. We have rules and regulations that apply to the platting of property. And this is one of the most confused areas for citizens to understand because state law requires public hearings a lot of time, and yet it doesn't give the Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council any discretion other than to just approve the plat. And a lot of times citizens will appear at public hearings and they'll voice very legitimate comments, and then the response they get is, although those are legitimate comments, the law says we have to approve this plat anyway. And that's what we're dealing with tonight. We have a final plat on the agenda, which if it meets the city's regulations, the City Council is required to approve it. And I think some very legitimate questions have been raised tonight by this particular speaker, and I was going to ask Mr. Pliska to address some of those concerns because our regulations should not allow more than one family to be in any one house in a single-family neighborhood. This property is zoned single-family 2. That allows for one single-family residence on each platted lot, and only one family, as defined in our ordinance, is allowed to live in that structure. If we're having a problem with more than one family living in these structures, then that's something that should be enforced by city staff. That should not be allowed. It's against the law. Another very legitimate concern that was raised tonight is parking. And we have minimum parking requirements for every house that is constructed in a single-family residential zone. And Mr. Pliska can address what those requirements are, but we require paved off-street parking for vehicles. And I think this woman's concern is that may be well and good, but if we're going to have several families living in the house, then that doesn't do much good. Again, it comes back to a question of enforcement. We should not allow several families to be living in these houses. And I think she's raised a very good concern, and that ought to be a wake-up call to us to make sure that doesn't happen.
Did that answer your questions? Yes, and more. Councilmember Hutchison and then Councilmember Branson.
Yeah, I think that's the thought that ran through my mind, what our city attorney just asked. And I guess what I was going to ask you, ma'am, is were these existing structures, before these gentlemen came forward with their plat, intended to be single-family dwellings also?
Yes, they were. One of the ones was already, the people had already moved into it, and it's the one right across the street that keeps losing their children. And we, on that one, they have probably 4 families in it. The one that backs up to them has built a shed back there in the back and blocked in all the windows and everything. They have, I don't know how many men living in that. They come and go quite often.
Yes, ma'am.
Plus what's in the house up front.
Okay, and that answers my question. They also have parking, off-street parking for their vehicles also. In other words, they have driveways.
Yeah, that one
houses.
has a driveway up front, and then they've made them a dirt driveway in the back.
Well, okay, so it sounds to me like that there's an enforcement issue with those properties.
Right.
And so my next question to Mr. Hedgecoth or Mr. Russ is that are these plats intended for building single-family structures so that only single families live there?
I'll let Mr. Russ.
Okay.
My name is Jimmy Rust, and I appreciate the lady coming up too, because I want to be neighbors, and I've lived in Haltom City all my life and understand what you're saying. These homes are 2-car garage. They do have the 20-foot driveways going up to the 2-car garage, so there's plenty of parking there. I've built 7, 8, 10 homes in the last year in Haltom City. Same way, same garage. I do not build single-car garages. They're always 2-car garage with the 20-foot driveways coming up. The lots are the same size as any of the city lots, or bigger really than most of the city lots. There's over 6,700 square foot of open land on each one of these lots, so where the house, after you take the house away. Yes, they do back up to the apartments. I have put a complete new solid wooden fence to separate us and the apartments. They will be fenced in, the yards will, for the children. Both houses are under contract. They have been under contract for over 2 months while we've been working on this plat. They are single families. Young people that are buying the homes, this is their second home. Each one had to sell a home to buy this home. Each one is just them. It's not them and someone else, or them and their parents, or anything like that. I understand the issues the lady has, but it really doesn't concern these 2 homes or the families that are moving in these 2 homes, because both homes are already sold.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Russ. Councilmember Branson, did you have a question for the previous speaker?
Well, actually, I think Mr. Russ, well, I know Mr. Russ answered my question. My question was, you mentioned 1,800 to 2,000 square foot homes, and I was wondering if those were comparable to the sizes of homes already on that street?
It'd be a little larger.
But he said they were already under contract. My thought process being that if they were oversized for the neighborhood, that they might not be quite as marketable, but you said they were already under
Yes,
contract.
ma'am. It's the plans, I've built them twice already, like I said, in the city. And it's about the same size as the home to the west of it, of our property here. The home to the west is a home that was probably built 3 or 4 years ago, and it's the same size as that home. It's not a big 2-story or anything like that. It's just a nice, it's 2,200 square foot foundation, counting the garage, which puts these homes at around 1,650 to 1,700 square foot, counting the back porch, a covered back porch, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Muir.
James, Wayne kind of beat me to the punch a little bit.
Yes,
but,
he did. He did a good job, too.
Apparently, there seems to be an enforcement problem.
Yes, and this
Can you
type of
address those
enforcement,
concerns?
I certainly will. This type of enforcement, it's very important that we do get the neighbors' input, simply because that is the basis for the zoning ordinance, is to protect the residential areas. But also, it states that it is single family. It doesn't mean that you can erect a garage in the back or enclose a garage and then bring in an additional family. But we need reports from the citizenry on these types of issues, because those are relatively hard to enforce unless we have that type of information that she has provided. Once we have that information, however, it is very easy to determine who is exactly residing there.
So that's something we'll follow up with her and get specifics as far as, she seems to know which houses
Yes.
are the problems.
Absolutely.
But
But also, if I may comment, that's the importance of the way the zoning ordinance requires providing 2 parking spaces behind the front yard setback. And that means 2 parking spaces in the garage. Therefore, you've got 2 cars in the garage. You may have a third or a fourth, well, then therefore, those 2 relatively should be right outside and in the driveway. It's when people start to enclose those garages or store things in those garages that do throw traffic out into the street. And then when you have multiple car families like she's speaking of, then you do have congestion being thrown onto the street. And that's why we look at these issues, and we've only gone before the board, the Zoning Board of Adjustments, if a house wishes to enclose a garage or build a single-car garage, which we do not look favorably upon in this city, simply because, as she stated, it throws congestion to the street.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad my wife's here to hear that, because she uses our garage as storage. So this is really great. My truck's never seen the inside of my garage. So, thank you. She thought I was teasing. I'm glad you validated that for me.
Mr. City Manager, you need someplace to stay tonight.
No, my kids are out of town. I think I'm going to be sleeping in one of their rooms tonight.
Tom, you know, my house is on the way to your house, so you got a room.
Mr. Pliska, you want to continue
Yes, sir.
before we deteriorate further?
That's okay. But again, that is a severe violation, because that is the premise of that district. It is single family. It is a single family district. And so therefore, the zoning ordinance, when you violate it, can wield a heavy hammer. That is a $2,000 per day per violation, and could be assessed as such.
Anything further you need to say before I recognize Councilmember Branson?
Mayor White, excuse me.
Let me just make sure
Thought you were in enough trouble.
Yeah, well, at least she won't be coming to any more meetings anytime soon. Do you have her information to where you can get
Yes,
with
she
her?
stated her name and
Oh, that's
address
right.
for
She
the
did.
record.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and we'll make contact with her. I just would like to add, if the council is not comfortable and you get the okay from the applicant, I do not mind running it back through P&Z and redoing the notices.
Councilmember Branson?
Thank you. You piqued my curiosity, and probably anyone that's watching TV. Will you define a single family?
Yes, a single family, that which is produced by a mother and a father and its necessary offspring, and it includes a daughter or a son and their, of course, offspring. You could feasibly still have, let's say, a separated family and a daughter or a son move back into that family, and as long as they're within the same bloodline, I do believe that still constitutes single family.
What about mother-in-law? or father-in-law.
And typically, what zoning ordinances do, I don't have our zoning ordinance in front of me, but typically, as long as you're living under the same roof and you have single kitchen facilities and bathroom facilities, et cetera, that you can bring extended family members in as long as they are related. Where you run into problems is where you have unrelated persons above a certain number who live together, or when you start converting garage units or second structures into separate living facilities with kitchens and bathroom facilities, then you start to encourage additional families to move in.
So multi-generational is not a problem.
That's not a legal
it's-
problem.
it's
That's
not a
correct.
legal problem.
They're living under the same,
Right.
in the same house with the same housekeeping units, et cetera.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it.
Ma'am, were you through speaking to the council? Okay, we'll move on then. Do we have anyone else in the audience? This is a public hearing and it's continuing. Do we have anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak either for or against this final plat? Mr. Eklund, if you'll give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. I'm glad that we got my notes covered the multifamily thing. I'm glad we got some of that cleared up because it is a problem in some of those neighborhoods. That particular neighborhood also has garage apartments tucked up and down the street as well. That whole area, we hope to see some revitalization. It's a very nice neighborhood. It's older, but it has big trees, and it's a place that I see young professionals, if we market it correctly, young professionals will come into our city and start to revitalize those things. They will move into a house like Mr. Rust's building, and they will plant flowers, and they will spend money at the store, and they have disposable income. Unfortunately, some of our neighborhoods have been overrun with multi-family things and too many cars and all these kinds of problems, and I'm glad to see that this will be brought forward and move forward. I'd like to say on behalf of Mr. Rust's application, he's built several houses in this town. I was in front of a couple of them yesterday. They're very attractive houses. He's done a nice job throughout town in his efforts. And in regards to the community down there, it's a lovely neighborhood. I spent a lot of time down there and looking, to do things down there. And this looks like, a project that will bring that whole neighborhood up and maybe inspire someone down the street to revamp their house, those that aren't already, as maybe hers is. So I don't know how the plat should go tonight, but that area is due for revitalization. This is the kind of revitalization, one kind that we would like to see, is that and rehabbing old houses. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on this item, either for or against? Okay, there being none, I'll close the public hearing at this time. And council, I'm ready for a motion regarding your wishes on whether or not to approve this plat. Councilmember Holcomb?
I move to approve the final plat.
Councilmember Hutchison?
That would be a second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? There be Councilmember Lanford.
Just want to make sure that we all understand that this motion before us is to allow the plat to be approved. That's not the same as approving people breaking the law. And those are separate issues, and I hope we've made that clear tonight, that we've got clearly got some enforcement issues, and we'll take care of that. And that this vote tonight is not a reflection of us saying that we don't care about what's going on in the neighborhood. We do, and we'll take care of that by the enforcement actions.
Okay, any further discussion? If you will, register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote of the council. We move now to the Visitor Citizens Forum. We have had two forms filled out. These individuals will be granted an opportunity to address the council for 6 minutes. If we have those in the audience who have not turned one in at this point, they'll have an opportunity to address the council for a 3-minute time period. This time is set aside for any person having business before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda to have an opportunity to speak to the council. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on the speaker's request form and must refrain from personal attacks toward any individuals. All comments must be directed toward the presiding officer rather than to individual council members or staff. Since this was not posted 72 hours prior to the beginning of this meeting, council cannot discuss or debate any issue brought forth at this time, nor can any formal action be taken. With that having been said, Linda Cantrell, if you will give us your name and address for the record, you wish to speak regarding boards and commissions.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Linda Cantrell, and I live at 628 Little Fossil Road, Haltom City. And I moved here in November of 2003, primarily because of my friend Jim Gerzan. He had a serious medical condition, and I moved here to assist him. But I like Haltom City, so I decided to stay. And one of the first people that I met when I came here was Mayor Pro Tem Sutton. And he was very encouraging to me that I should get involved with the city, doing things that I enjoy doing. And at the time, I was working for the Department of Human Services through the state of Texas. And my background, I worked for more than 20 years with the state, and I dealt with the elderly, the handicapped, and low-income families. So I felt like that would be a good background to recommend me to be on the housing board. And I mentioned that to Mayor Pro Tem, and he was very encouraging. And I worked with him in another aspect, working in a workshop with Patricia Conley and Dee Taylor about the water rates. And all along, the whole time that I've been living in Haltom City, I've had nothing but support from Mayor Pro Tem Sutton. So I'm very happy that I met him and have been able to work with him. I've also had very good experience with Kim Reese and Bill Lanford. And I've just recently kind of got to know Chris Holcomb. But I like this city, and I'm a real advocate of volunteerism. When I worked for the state, I was on the volunteer committee, and every year I worked with them to do a yearly presentation and luncheon for the volunteers that we had, and I utilized volunteers. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I retired from the state was to volunteer. I get a retirement check so I don't have to worry about income. And so the first thing that I did was I signed up to be the nursing home ombudsman, and I am the volunteer nursing home ombudsman for the Life Care Center here in Haltom City, which I was at today. And I also have another nursing home in Richland Hills. I have signed up as a volunteer under the VIPS program with the police department and have tried to volunteer a few hours every month there. They're kind of demanding. They want you to spend the whole day with them, and I don't usually want to do that. But I have enjoyed what I've done with them. But the one thing, I have here the application that I filled out in October of 2004, my copy of it. And there's 12 different boards and commissions listed here. The Animal Advisory, Beautification, Crime Prevention, Economic Development, Fire Services, Housing Authority, Library, Parks and Recreation, Planning and Zoning, Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, Sexually Oriented Board of Appeals, and Zoning Board of Adjustment. Well, the only one I checked was the Housing Board because I felt like that's the one I was best qualified to do. In my tenure with the state, I assisted many clients in finding an appropriate assisted living facility to go to, took people down to the Housing Authority in the city of Fort Worth to apply for Section 8 housing, assisted people to relocate from where they were at to get into that type of housing. Mr. Gerzan and people that he's acquainted with assisted me once getting some people relocated. I mean, I've been real active in working with people that need assistance with housing. So I really felt like that would go a long way in qualifying me to do this. the last council meeting that I was at, Mayor White announced that he was the one that made the appointments for the Housing Authority, and that he had one to be made, but he wasn't ready to do that. So I called him and told him that I had filled out my application and submitted it correctly, and that I was interested. And he seemed quite surprised that I called him and that I was interested. But not only that, he said he never had seen my application. So my question is, once again, we've talked about, selective code enforcement, problems with code enforcement. And I'm saying, do we not have a policy for how we're going to select people to be on these boards and commissions? And if we have a policy, do we have it in writing so everybody can see it? I personally feel like that I've received disparate treatment here because I was told he had already made his selection and he had never seen my application. This is a copy of my application. It is a date stamp by the city secretary, October 11th, 2004, the same day I signed it. It also is stamped, copy, City Council. So I ask you, Mr. White, Mayor White, if you didn't see my application, why not? I believe, I'm not through, please.
Okay.
I believe that the reason you didn't see my application is because when you decided to make your decision, you chose your friends and your buddies. You did not go back to the city secretary's office. You did not go through the pending applications. I believe this is discrimination. I think it has to do with how long I've lived in the city, my gender, and the location of the city that I live in. I think this city council needs to get policies. They need to be in writing, and you need to follow them.
Ms. Cantrell, you are correct. I do make the appointments to the Housing Authority, and I will be in contact with you tomorrow. And I can't discuss this any further here tonight because it wasn't posted, but I will be in contact with you tomorrow to follow up on your comments. Our second speaker tonight is Mr. Bill Journay. If you will, Mr. Journay, if you'll give us your name and address for the record. You wish to speak on seat belts, insurance, and holiday cops.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Bill Journay, 4529 Nadine Drive, Haltom City. Haven't you noticed every holiday season or major sports events like auto racing, ball games, television and radio will warn us of the extra police that will be on our streets. Their purpose is to catch those not wearing seat belts or not having proper legal auto insurance. This is not really a bad thing, but have you noticed it's only done on holidays? But they never pay concern to other major offenses or violations. This threatens only the poor and vulnerable and allows the accidents and deaths little or no consideration. Have you ever wondered why? A person can drive around for a lifetime with neither insurance policy nor seat belt and never cause an accident. This isn't likely, however, with the lax traffic laws. But then, if you have insurance and wear your seat belts, why should law enforcement or insurance even be concerned? Nor will you ever hear of the media, DOT, or local enforcement warning us that other traffic violations will be a major target on holidays or any other time. What's wrong with this picture? What causes most accidents and deaths? Would another policy or seatbelt help? Why are speeders, careless, reckless drivers being ignored? Why is there never a campaign to curb such behavior and accidents and deaths? These people are the cause. Insurance seatbelts is only the small part of the effect. Precaution and responsibility. Why pay attention to the lesser and not the major perpetrators? If our traffic laws are no longer enforceable, let's take them off the books and not just pander to the insurance companies. Which is more important, to curb the war and warlike casualties and destruction on our streets by properly enforcing our traffic laws, or to make sure that the law of commerce and insurance is observed, and pander to the insurance lobsters who really care nothing about our social justice or even if we live or die. Forced insurance and seatbelt laws have done nothing to stop traffic violations, accidents, pardon me, or even deaths. But it's about money and power and control, isn't it? And has little or nothing to do with traffic safety, casualties, or justice. And the only ones truly benefiting from the holiday cops, insurance, and seatbelt roundups is, again, business and government. The people have been duped again. This almost sounds like an illegal immigration issue, doesn't it? Honest government? Checkmate. Ed Wallace, a radio commentator on Saturday mornings, has reported a North Texas town police department that generated more than $32,000 in just one holiday campaign. He reported that although financially the roundups have been successful through the years, they have not decreased the number of accidents or casualties. Now, my favorite quotations I have: "Ye blind guides which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you leaders, law enforcers, lobsters, for you make clean the outside of a cup and plate for us, but within they are full of extortions and excess." Who said that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Journay. Do we have anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council who has not filled out a speaker's request card? Okay, there being none, we move now to new business. That consists of items number 10 and 11. At the last council meeting, I had requested both of these items to be placed on the council agenda for discussion tonight. Let's take them in order. First of all, the library. Just by way of introduction, in 2001, the voters of Haltom City approved a bond issue, that part of which was the construction of a new library. And the promise we made to the citizens at that time, and the timeline for that to be in place, was in 2004. Well, here we are in 2005. And there have been some challenges along the way to getting this library up and going. And I felt it was very important, so that we not lose faith with the people who own this city, with the citizens and the voters and the business owners, that we have just an update and a discussion by not only staff but by the council as well regarding the library, where we are, where we're going, what our citizens can expect with regard to the construction of the new library. So if you'll notice, this is posted as discussion. There's to be no action taken by the council tonight, simply a discussion on the building of the new library. Mr. Muir, would you like to lead off the discussion?
Sure. As the mayor stated, in November of 2001, a bond election was held, and the citizens approved various items on that ballot, one of which was $4 million for a new library. And I think there was a timeline associated with it, at least in the promotional literature, at least in the literature that was advising the citizens of the election. And there's been some challenges with that. $4 million started off behind the eight ball anyway, that $4 million was not going to be enough to buy land and to build a 30,000 square foot library. So knowing that, the staff has opted to work with the EDC to help get them to help fund at least a land situation for the library. In that process, and that's been a long and arduous process that doesn't seem to have an end in sight, it seems like. Condemnation process was started by the city, and it's gone longer than any condemnation process I've ever been involved with. And during that time, the city has worked with EDC as far as changing the condemnation authority over to the EDC. This is on possibly, the property in question is it's between Haltom Road and Denton Highway, north of Glenview and south of Spring Lake. And exactly where the library would go if this were able to go on there is still being planned and possibly developed. That's an initial desire or initial site for it. There's knowing that there's issues with this acquisition. We're dealing with a landowner who would like very much for the library to go there. He likes the plans that we've got, but the main thing he's interested in is money, and he will take as long as he can, drag this out as long as he can to get the most money he can for it. And that's what we're experiencing. It's, like I said, it's very long and very aggravating process. We started some preliminary design work that I have since suspended, knowing that this process was going very slowly. We've also working on some other possibilities that I'm not ready to reveal right now as far as being publicly what we might be doing, but we are pursuing some other things, trying to get this thing off center. We, as the mayor stated, we are very late in this, and you've heard me talk about it at least every now and then, once a month during my CIP. I may not talk about the library a whole lot because there hadn't been a whole lot to report, but in the CIP report, we do give updates on what's going on with the library project. I've worked closely with the library board to keep them informed as far as the issues that are at hand. I don't know, notwithstanding that, I'm just as disappointed as anybody else in here, probably more so. Probably not as disappointed as Leslie, but more so than most people are. It's very frustrating. And I know the city attorney's been working hard on trying to get the process off track, at least with this one land buy. But there are options out there for us to consider, and something, and funding is certainly an issue. We don't have the debt structure in the city to, at least as a city, to issue additional debt as far as another $1 or $2 million for a land buy. Putting it in a strip center is an option, but that's something that's being considered, but I'm not sure that's a first or second desire of a lot of folks, a lot of citizens. But we're looking at everything we can to get this thing going, to give the citizens the new library that they voted on back in 2001. I'll take any questions if anybody has any at this time.
Yeah, let's approach it that way first. Does any member of the council have a question or comment on anything Mr. Muir just said? Then we'll give members of the council an opportunity to make whatever comments they have regarding this, and then I'll dispense with the usual rules we have about audience participation. If anyone in the audience, we'll conduct this like a public hearing. I can do that, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So I think in order to give people who are in the audience an opportunity to make whatever comments they'd like, we will treat this as a public hearing, and that'll give everybody an opportunity to make any comments they'd like to. So we'll have, first of all, questions for Mr. Muir, then members of the council make whatever comments they'd like, and then we'll open the floor to the members of the audience. Councilmember Lanford.
I just had a comment and no questions. It's not. It's just a short comment. I was just going to tell you that just today I was in a discussion in which it would appear that there's a possible break in the record high steel prices that have been with us for a while, and that's a big issue when you're building a library, is the price of steel. So I just want to comment that we may have just backed into by being delayed while it's painful. We may have stumbled into a good situation with regard to the price of steel by the time we really get around to building it, because last year it was really high, and it still is, but it looks like, as things tend to do cyclical in economies worldwide and in particular commodities, that we may be able to, after all, when it's all said and done, we may be able to save some money on our steel.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you. That leads right into the next thing. Tom, whenever we talk about how much this is going to cost, can we kind of get an idea per square foot? Because a lot of people think in terms of what's the dollar cost per square foot of a library. Do you have any figure like that of what we're proposing? Is it $50 a square foot or $100 a square foot? Or what are we talking in terms of the library that we're thinking about building?
It'll be probably in the 100 to 50 and up.
Okay, the only reason I ask that is because if we're thinking that for a 35,000 square foot building, $4 million shakes out to $133 a square foot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the dilemma that we're faced with. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, for, right at, anywhere at the 30,000 square foot level, it's in that area. We realized that at the time when the bonds, I guess when the election was done, that it was an uphill battle at that time, and that was 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. So, you're right.
So, and that's taking the entire $4 million, not allocating like $100,000 or $200,000 for land or pavement
Correct.
or driveway or anything. That's taking the entire
Correct.
$4 million and applying it to the building.
Yeah, the project started off deficient, funding-wise, but there are some alternatives that we thought we were going to be able to deal with and address, and that's why we talked to the EDC about if they could help. One thing I didn't mention in my presentation, it wasn't so much regarding the project itself, but I know to the citizens, they've heard me talk about it every now and then, and I don't want anybody to think that it's not important. I mean, we've had a lot of things going on. We had a fire station, the municipal service center, a rec center that's finally open. That maybe the library would be taking a back seat until some of these things, and that hasn't been the case. At least to a large degree, it hasn't. It's certainly been a very working project. It's been something that we've all been working diligently in, and that the council is very concerned. I don't think a week goes by that one of these elected officials, or even the former elected officials, the ones who put it on the ballot, don't ask about something regarding this library. It's certainly very prevalent in the community. While I haven't had a whole lot of citizens talk to me about it, per se, I know that the elected officials certainly do, and it's certainly something that weighs on their mind.
Well, anyway. Tom, let me ask, and I rechecked my figures again, and it's actually $114 per square foot for a 35,000 square foot building for $4 million. Is there any chance that means that we need to build a smaller building? Instead of 35,000, it would be something smaller than that.
It never got to be 35. It was always going to be 30.
Oh,
was
30.
Was going to be the limit, but go ahead and run your calculations, and
yeah.
$4 million ain't going to do it. It's going to be tough to get the
30.
And I'm just shooting 150 off
that works out to my 133.
Yeah,
right?
it's could it get done at the 133. I mean, when we did it, and even when I got here in '02, it was possible. I mean, it was going to be a challenge, but it could be done. And I'm not going to say that I'm not going to do it. I mean, you faced with, do you spend $4 million and get what you can for $4 million, or do you go ahead and do a 30,000 square foot library? 30,000 square feet, even by the state standards, is not enough for a town this size. It should be a third larger than that. So, but 30,000 is what is what has been stated. 4 million is what's been voted on. That's what I've got to work with.
You mentioned state standards. We might want to say what those state standards are for libraries that you're referring
It's
to.
a square foot per capita.
Square foot per capita, which is in the state code, right?
That'd be just short of 40,000 square feet for us.
All right.
Okay, anyone else question or comment for Mr. Muir? Okay, there being none, members of the council, any comment you'd like to make regarding the building of the new library? Councilmember Branson.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that a week doesn't go by that I don't call Tom with some new idea. And Tom, I just came from a little swing through the hill country and came back with quite a few ideas. So I don't want the citizens to think that we're not looking everywhere we go for ideas on what to do with libraries. I even have friends from out of town call and say, have you seen what a certain town did to build a library? So even though we may not have our 30,000 square foot library yet, actually some of the suggestions have been quite comical, or at least Tom has found them quite comical. But there are some other ideas floating around out there, and there have been some cities, smaller cities and some comparable to our size, that have come up with some pretty creative ways to build libraries. So I'm hoping that, and this is down in your old stomping ground, so I'm sure you know some of the people to talk to.
Yeah, and there are, I mean, we were talking about funding, and Jim, you were talking about funding too. We've talked about grants. And the funny thing with grants, you can't apply for a grant or get a grant until you get land. And so, and I think we would be positioned fairly well to receive some grants, even from some of these private foundations, you know, considering our demographics and where we are and what we are and what we've got. I think we would score fairly well in those types of things, but until we secure property, we can't start that process.
But we'll have conversations about some I saw, and it's not the Lukenbach Library or anything like that, but there were some pretty creative.
I'm all ears. And no,
some
Lukenbach is not my stopping ground.
Well, and I don't think they have a library, but a library that we would invite our
They probably
citizens
have a
to
bar
anyway.
in there or something.
But they have had some pretty interesting uses of buildings down in the hill country for some of their municipal buildings, and some of them were libraries. So I'm sure you and Leslie probably already looked at them, but I'm going to mention them again.
Okay.
And they've done some pretty creative things with storefronts as well.
Super.
Down there.
Councilmember Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with all due respect to Leslie also, I think one of the things that's crossed my mind in just commenting is the visibility of the library, and the fact that the library has to be, has to be at a place where it is easily accessible to all of the public. And the land that we've picked out, I think the person that is trying to, for lack of a better expression, squeeze as much out of us as he possibly can, knows that this place is visible. So it would seem to be that it would be possible that we could find someplace else that would be just as highly visible. I know that Leslie and I have talked about this a number of times, and just from my viewpoint, this is a very this is on the top of my agenda. I seem to echo what the mayor said, in terms of getting the library built, and we must start on it soon. I think it's something the citizens really want now. And it seems like that every time I talk to a citizen from Haltom City, this is one of the first things that comes out of their mouth, is speaking about the library too. So you can count on my support in terms of trying to, as hard as we can, to continue to find the best place, the most visible place, within reason. And I appreciate what Bill Lanford said about the price of steel. Perhaps that could be a breaking point right now, so we could get started on this. It's almost a head shaker right now, and I just feel like that we could get past these legal problems by trying to find someplace else that's more visible around our city.
Anyone else wish to make a comment regarding this? Okay, before I open it to members of the audience, let me make just one brief comment. In addition to what I said in introducing this subject a moment ago, I do think it's important for us to move forward with this project in a timely manner, even with the challenges we're faced with. It's not an easy matter, and I know our city manager has wrestled with this and agonized over it, but I think our citizens are looking to staff and elected officials to provide leadership. If Plan A that we've been pursuing doesn't work, I believe we have a responsibility to find Plan B and pursue that. And if Plan B doesn't work, let's see about Plan C. So I'm in support of us continuing to pursue this aggressively, and I know the day will come in Haltom City when we'll have a brand new $4 million library. I don't know where it'll be right now, but when that day comes, we will all be so proud, like we have been with the new fire station, the public works facility, and the others. So there is hope. There is hope. There are some real challenges. Okay, so much for comments from elected officials. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to make comment to address, give us your input at this time? Mr. Milholland, I think you had your hand up first, and then Mr. Eklund.
Thank you, Mayor. R.D. Milholland, 3711 Jean Lane. I'm glad that you've brought this forward. I think this is something that the city has been, that citizens anyway have been talking about. I know on some of the electronic media discussions going on with the city, this is something that's been raised before. Just a few points I'd like to make at this time. The city can save money on this project by using property that's already owned by the city. I'm not a designer. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an expert on libraries, but there's a large piece of land. Now I know Mr. Muir is not as convinced as I am, and I respect that. But I think that design can overcome maybe the size shortcomings of the land that's adjacent to the new fire station. There is a fairly large chunk of land there the city owns that could be used. Now it would necessitate, I'm sure, a two-story structure. This is one opportunity. I know there's several. I like the storefront ideas. I think this is thinking outside the box. And so there are, of course, many different ways to go with this. Another option might be to work with the BISD. In this community and in surrounding communities, there's an obvious need for adult education. And there might be some funding possibilities by working with some additional funding possibilities, grants, for instance, by working with the ISD to incorporate an adult learning center into the library to make it more of a multi-use facility, meetings, etc. And a third thing, when we finish talking about this, you're going to be bringing up the idea of revitalization of the Belknap corridor. Here it is. Here's one of the potential anchors for a revitalized commercial district. If the library was to be an architecturally significant building, something that would call attention to a centralized location there on Belknap, this would be a way to get things started redevelopment in that area. So with that, let me pass it on to the next speaker.
Mr. Eklund. Thank you, Mr. Milholland. I didn't ask either one of these gentlemen to give their name, but you have it in the record. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ray Eklund. Mr. Milholland's comment about the school district brought to mind that there's a bond issue coming up, and if it is successful, they will be demolishing a couple of schools and actually putting the dirt up for sale, theoretically. So there will be several acres, and I know one of them is not very publicly noted, but I'm not too sure where the other one might be, so maybe the other one will be better shape. That'd be interesting. I would hate to see us move forward and put ourselves behind the eight ball and take something less than the best for our citizens and going 30% below the recommended standards. And I understand that we've discussed that over the last 3 years. 30,000 square feet is 10,000 square feet less than 40,000 square feet, which is what we should have according to standards. So I understand the funding problems, but I hate to see us end up with something less than adequate with what we hope will be a growing population as we fill in some more. So I don't want to
keep in mind that the design, the architect's been tasked with doing something that is expandable. Okay. That's going to be, we're going to be able to grow with. I'm not anticipating a whole lot of growth for Haltom City, because there's not a whole lot of more we can do as far as citizen-wide, but it is going to be structured to where it would be available for growth.
Well, I think that's an important consideration. I also submitted some designs to the board, putting the library in between two functioning business entities, so that we might get some benefit from that. But whatever comes of it, it comes of it. I sure do like the Belknap corridor idea, and we'll be talking about that here next. But my favorite spot was down there, the old Stevens building. It was a large building, and there's some land. It was up for sale for years and years and years, and now it seems to have something going on there, but not a whole lot. Right there at the corner of Belknap and the Denton Highway. So I'm a big fan of getting rid of the ugly, for lack of a better term. And so I like reusing things and going into places, because you got a dual benefit if you can do that. You took away the ugly thing and you put something useful in its place, rather than going out to new places. I found over my career that people tend to want to add on the back of their house while the front of it's falling down. And I think we do that as a city sometimes as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Before I call on any other citizen, Councilmember Branson, you had
I have a question for Mr. Muir. You mentioned that it's per capita square footage wise. Is that total library space per city? So if there was a 30,000 square foot library in X location at some future point, could there be a small satellite that would
you could
add
combine
up to
those.
you could combine the two? So it
Yes.
doesn't have to be one building.
Correct.
That's 40,000 square feet. We could have a
Branch.
Somewhere else that would make up that
Yes.
10,000 square foot difference at some time in the
You
future.
could, and there's no requirement to get to that point. I'm just saying that is the state's level.
Oh, no, I just wanted to be sure that, I thought I knew the answer.
Yeah.
But I
You're
wanted
right.
to be sure that everyone didn't have a perception in their mind that it had to be a 40,000 square foot building in one place.
very
It could
accurate.
be broken up into other areas.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else in the audience? Mr. Williams.
John Williams, 4609 Biscayne, Haltom City. Mr. Mayor, city staff, city council, thanks for allowing me to address you. I was a part of this bond package in pushing it when it went for the library. The library director, I was corrected, they're not librarians, but the library directors were very excited about what we were going to do. At that time, it was very close for $4 million to cover what we needed to do. But the council's thought at that time was possibly we could use some land that we already owned. That way the entire $4 million could go toward the construction of the library. Through the years from 99, 2000, 2001, there's been some land acquired by the city through back taxes. One of them's the Jordan property up on Haltom Road, which is just 300 yards north of the project y'all are talking about now. Mr. Milholland brought up the piece of property a while ago at Meadow Oaks and Broadway by the library, and Mr. Davenport didn't seem to think that was a good place, but those two pieces of property that the city owned there, they have over $200,000 in those two pieces of property. There's another piece of property right behind the old Winn-Dixie, not the new old one, but the old one at Stanley Keller and Denton Highway. A little over 2 acres in there. It's got some drainage problems. But we purchased that land back in 2000, I think, for a little over $30,000. So we're sitting on some land right now that's not being taxed. I know EDC's working on some projects on some different property, and I'm not on EDC anymore, but I still won't say anything about where they're at. There is some property available, possibly a land swap, like we did with ISI when we changed the, they were going to put their facility down on Airport Freeway, and we did land swap and got them in a different place. So, and I talked to the city manager about multi-story, which if we went on the corner of Meadow Oaks and Broadway, it would be multi-story, and he immediately shook his head no and said he didn't want that. And I respect him for that, but there's also stuff that I don't want. And if you'll go over by my house, you'll see it. There's a big oval door with a glass in it. I didn't want it, but it's there. And that's because the boss wanted it there and not me. So I respect your opinion that you don't want it there. One place that's probably never been brought up before that's kind of comical is at the corner of Haltom Road and Stanley Keller, where the old grocery store used to be. In my opinion, that grocery store is not up to date, not really a good piece of property used at the best and highest use of the property. There's no cleaners that sits out there that's been vacant forever. I don't know why it's not rented. There's a little church behind there, and they'd probably like to have a little extra money to build another sanctuary somewhere. So that's one piece of property that probably hadn't been thought of. But I just got back from the East Coast 2 weeks ago, and we're talking multi-stories. The Empire State Building's 120 stories tall. It used to not be that tall. Mr. Eklund's talking about adding on to the back of your house. It used to be shorter than that, but when they built the Chrysler Building, they got worried that the Chrysler Building was going to be bigger than it, so they went taller with it to outdo the Chrysler Building. I don't recommend a 120-story library, but you know, I think that we might look at a multi-story library if we have to take land with the cost of land and where it's at. Mr. Milholland brought up the deal about Belknap. You're going to have the fight between the North and the South. You know, the South's they're going to want their part, the North's going to want their part. And I think if you can stay up where you're trying to look at the land right now, you're kind of in a median with that. But those are some suggestions. The deal with your land probably, you're trying to foreclose on up there, I think it's going to be a while. One other deal, and I don't like putting public property or city property or anything like that, or private church and stuff on main corners. The opposite side of the Glenview Baptist Church there on the would be the southeast corner where the No-Tell Hotel is. Would kill two birds with one stone. You get rid of the hotel and put a nice library there.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilmember Sutton, before I ask anyone else in the audience if they'd like to speak.
Sure. I think Mr. Williams brings up a good point that the location of the library really does need to serve both ends of the town. And Haltom City is kind of unique in that we have we're kind of long and narrow. And so where we locate a library, to get the best and effective use of it, should be somewhere in the middle, where everybody can access that library. And that limits the type of property or the property that we can use for a library. So that's another element in there, I think, that needed to be brought out, and I appreciate Mr. Williams bringing that out.
Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on building the new library?
Mayor?
Okay, yes. Mr. Muir, you want to wrap this up?
Well, I'd love to. If you
And
can,
then we'll take a quick break after we're through with
well,
this.
if you can indulge me, since I stuck
Yes.
my foot in my mouth with my attached storage room earlier about the garage, my wife is dying to ask something, and I'm told her no, but since I got to sleep with her tonight, so I got to go home. You got something you want to ask, sweetie? Really? You had a question. I'm going to get it now.
You're so past. I just was going to ask if y'all do any kind of demographics as to who uses the library most, where, if that would affect the location. And I'm going to display my ignorance here and ask, is eminent domain an option at all in
That's what we're doing.
Oh, okay. And also, if you get grants, if you have the land, would it be worth it to buy the property in order to get the grants? Just pay big bucks up front to purchase the land in order to get the grants?
It's risky.
Okay.
Very risky.
That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Councilmember Sutton.
Yeah, it just flew out of my mind. I'm sorry. Kathy asked a question. I'll forget it.
You were going to tell Tom where he could pick up flowers on the way home. Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Okay, there being...
That'd be the storage building, wouldn't it?
There being no one else in the audience wishing to address the council on this subject, I do want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, first of all, for your comments. I want to thank you for your patience, and I want to thank the citizens who keep bringing this up. Where are we? What kind of progress are we making? It's good when citizens hold elected officials and staff members accountable, and I welcome that. So thank you for your comments. Thank all of you here for what you've had to say, and yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remembered it. I'm sorry. That eminent domain just really you talked about demographics and doing demographics for, who uses a library. And that is probably a good thing to do. And Leslie does keep excellent demographics. In fact, we get those every month about who uses a library and how many people use this service and that service. The thing about doing that is that if you get a new library that becomes more useful for other demographic groups, then that previous demographic study really doesn't contribute to where you want to base that library. So you kind of have to take a visionary approach to the library. Which type of people do you think would use it if you went this direction? That's why the demographics are of limited use, I think.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. The time is 8:35. We'll be back in here ready to approach the Belknap Study Corridor at 8:45. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the time is 8:45. The council is back in session following the 10-minute recess, and we are here to address item number 11, posted on the agenda as the Belknap Corridor Study. This is a discussion on conducting a study of the Belknap Corridor. At the last council meeting, I had asked the city manager if he would place this item on the agenda because I believe it has some tremendous potential, and I think there is a need for some discussion. Now, notice on the agenda, this is not posted for the council to take any kind of action. I simply had in mind that that there be some discussion began. There are two or three things I want to say before we proceed too much further. I'm aware that several years ago we had a study done, I think, by the University of Texas at Arlington, and I think the council took a look at it at that time, and Mr. Williams is here, and he may want to address that a little bit later in the discussion. I know since that time, a lot of things have happened along Belknap. We have a lot of the same that existed on Belknap that we had at the time that study was done back in the mid-'90s or late '90s. And we've had a lot of revitalization. We've had some new buildings, new businesses. A lot of interest has occurred along that line, and I believe it's time for us to just take a look at Belknap and cast a vision to what we would like to see happen along Belknap. And in the process of casting a vision, it's not something for 8 elected officials to do or even a city manager and his staff. It requires input from citizens, the thinking of business owners, the thinking of people who not only own the property along Belknap and in the feeder streets that go into Belknap, but the people who run the shops and the businesses along Belknap all need to have buy-in in this process. And what I was hoping for tonight is that we could just simply begin some discussion on that. One of the things that prompted me, as much as anything else, to ask this item be placed on the agenda is that our neighbors to the south and the west, Fort Worth, have some very active neighborhood associations along the Belknap corridor, and it is having some measurable impact. You can look at Ray Street along Belknap, you can look at another place or two, and you can see the focus of the vision that is being cast by those neighborhoods. The plan is to start down in that Race Street area with that renewal and revitalization that is occurring and bring that on up to Belknap. Here in Haltom City, we have an opportunity now to start thinking about that process and what can happen in Haltom City. I know Fort Worth intends to just keep coming up Belknap with what is taking place a little further down. And we're faced with some options. We can just let everything go on like it is and just whatever happens, happen. Or we can put into motion a process that can help us be a part of something to make significant improvements in an area of town that probably could stand a little bit of attention. But whatever we do, it is something that does not need to be imposed by one group of people on another group of people. It's something that everybody, and particularly those property owners and business owners along there, need to have an opportunity to have input and hopefully to gain buy-in in that process. So what I had in mind when I made this proposal is not so much an official study to be commissioned tonight, even though that may be something that the process will ultimately call for. What I had in mind tonight is to just start the ball rolling, start the process for a vision to be cast of what can happen. Belknap is a very important artery into this city. It has tremendous potential, and so tonight that was my intent, to just get this council and staff and citizens who are in the audience started talking about this. Have no idea where it will lead, but I believe it has some merit for us to spend some time taking a look at. So having said that, Mr. Muir, do you have anything you want to say at this point, or would you like for other members of the council to make their comments or what? Well, I gave you an opportunity on the other item on the library, and this may be a little different from that, but be glad to hear your comments. And then questions from the council for whatever Mr. Muir says or whatever I said or whatever anyone else says, and then comments by the council, and then we'll open it up to members of the audience for their input. See where we go with this discussion on casting a vision for Belknap over the next several years.
Okay. I think what you originally talked about at the last council meeting and here is a study, as a corridor study, and I wholeheartedly support that. The staff would certainly be glad to facilitate that in whichever way the council would like to go. I do want to point out that the staff is not equipped to do the study. We would have to job that out. We would have to hire a firm to conduct that study, and I don't think it'd be just a study. It could be multiple studies, depending on the focuses of what the council's wanting to do. From a marketing or promotional standpoint, it'd probably start off being more of the study could be very informational, helping with some decision-making processes that the council and or the staff would help along that corridor. Probably identify some issues and focus the energies of the development or the redevelopment along Belknap. Our economic development consultant Kent Flynn is here tonight, and he's going to be talking to y'all here a little bit about some thoughts that he's got, but it's very preliminary as far as how do we go about it, how do we fund this. That'll be something that I'll need to come back with the council to do that if this is something that we need to do. But with your indulgence, can Kent go ahead and Kent, if you can just spend a few minutes and share with the council some of your thoughts.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, Tom asked me to speak on this subject a little bit. I have been involved in similar studies in other cities. As a matter of fact, when coming here, I proposed to the two previous city managers that we actually do a study for Belknap. So I've long been a fan or an advocate of doing this kind of a study. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you might expect from a study and about the process itself a little bit, just in general terms. If nothing else comes out of something like this, a study, even if the proposals and plans don't come to fruition exactly as they are proposed, if nothing else, the study itself produces marketing products, something that's tangible that we can use to promote the city in a positive way, to promote Belknap. It draws attention, positive attention to the corridor. So it's something that people that are involved in economic development would like to see and have as a tool. Of course, the primary purpose of a study like this is to come up with information for decision makers, both the decision makers that we see here tonight in the public sector and private decision makers, those that are going to invest in the corridor itself. So it contains a body of information that can be very valuable in making those kinds of investment decisions. One of the purposes is to identify critical issues to focus energies on, because this city doesn't have unlimited resources, nor do investors that are likely to be attracted to that corridor. So we need to focus those redevelopment efforts and allow folks to get the maximum results from those efforts. The other thing is it's going to envision viable solutions because of what the mayor said and what Tom said, and that is that you're going to have stakeholders involved that are actually business operators, property owners, people that are very pragmatic and know what it takes to succeed and function and survive on Belknap. So it's not going to be some academic study. It'll be something that's very viable and usable if you have the stakeholders involved. Another thing is, another important byproduct is, it forms, the process itself forms a endeavor to develop consensus among the stakeholders. Well, that's just as important almost as coming up with some proposals, because if you get people pulling together, you get mutually reinforcing ideas and goals that will have a lot of support and go further. Also, it allows for there to be some coordination of effort. The city would actually form or play the coordinative role to bring private sector parties together so that we could have a coordinated effort and mutually beneficial goals and objectives would be formed. This way we could promote public-private partnerships. It's pretty difficult to do that if you don't have somebody coordinating or some entity coordinating the efforts. And like I said earlier, you'd have a multiplier effect because you'd have community support. And so we could promote the city from within. The very stakeholders that have a stake in the corridor would become part of this labor force, if you will, marketing the city, marketing the corridor. As to the form of the products that you get out of a study, typically what you have being developed is a conceptual redevelopment plan that would identify and target redevelopment efforts. Along with this, you would likely have catalyst type or pilot projects that you could focus your energies on, and would show some signs of success, because nothing breeds success like success. So if you can start small and create some things that actually get built, then that's likely to have a multiplier effect. Also, there'd be specific implementation strategies and recommendations for policies that would come out of this that would apply to the whole corridor. You'd also enable policymakers and stakeholders to implement economic development strategies from an assessment of what the opportunities are and the constraints. So by analyzing the corridor for its strengths and weaknesses, all would benefit from that. And you'd identify projects, hopefully, that people could focus on, investors could focus on. Two directions that might come out of such a study: one would be possibly that we could leverage and reinforce the recent reinvestments that have occurred there. Like the mayor indicated, there's been more reinvestment along Belknap in the last year or two than probably occurred in the 10 years previous. So what we need to do is, if we decide to do a study like this, is strike while the iron is hot and capitalize on that recent interest and investment in the corridor and try to figure ways that we can leverage off of what's already occurred. Another thing might be that comes out of it is a way to accentuate the Asian community interest and investment in the corridor, because there has been a lot of investment by the Asian community. Possibly by studying this, we could find ways to develop a sense of community and a unique identity for the corridor that would help market it as well. So I think there's a lot of positives that can come from such a study, and not the least of which is going through the process itself.
Members of the council, any questions or comments for Mr. Flynn?
And you made a comment about academic studies.
Mm-hmm.
The UTA study of a few years ago, I'm assuming, was an academic study. Is that where you were headed? Or?
Well, there's coincidence in the fact that was done by an academic institution, but studies in general have a criticism that they're academic in nature, and you get them done and they sit on a shelf. And what I'm saying is, if you structure your study correctly, that is the process, and you involve doers and builders and investors and stakeholders that actually have a practical sense about what can be done and directions that we can go in,
Sure.
Then you're going to get a more useful product.
Well, as I recall, one of the observations from that previous study was that a lot of the commercial properties along that corridor were not of sufficient depth. In other words, they weren't large enough, basically, to support a lot of the commercial needs of today. If we already know that, and if that's a key, first of all, do you agree that that's a key issue? And if it is that not something that the city could start doing something about that?
I would almost tend to look at it just the opposite, from the standpoint of zoning at least. And that is, Belknap follows a pattern that's pretty typical of early city development in all cities when zoning, because zoning's not all that old in this country. And that was where you just went in and blanket, put down a 350-foot deep strip of commercial zoning along corridors like that. That's not realistic today. There's a lot of land out there that's zoned commercially that's never, ever going to see retail development on. And really, what's happening, the trends in development, especially here lately in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as I've kind of indicated in some of my presentations to the EDC, is more a leaning towards recognition for what they call sustainable development, mixed-use development, where you look at trying to support your own uses right there with pedestrian-oriented traffic rather than everybody jump in a car and drive 15 minutes to get to a separated or segregated use. There's probably lots of opportunities along the corridor to take that perspective and analyze opportunities that would involve mixed uses rather than hold out and dream for big retail uses that will never come.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this, and this will be my last question. We'll let somebody else ask them. What role would you see for, if any, for public transportation in this corridor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do see a role. I guess one of the favorite photographs I have in this building is of the old Haltom City Bus Company. Okay, we used to have our own transit in this city many years ago, and it was during a time and era when all cities were involved in public transit. We kind of got away from that with the development of the car and several different subsidies basically that have evolved over the years through the federal government towards sprawl. But now everybody's coming back to the realization that we need to think in other terms. And I've actually made a proposal or a study, if you will, of a circulator system that involves Airport Freeway and Belknap and some of the properties that would link the two. We are fortunate, we kind of have a mixed blessing with all the drainage problems that we have in Haltom City. We probably have more than our fair share of those. However, what that's done is present, and I'm always looking for opportunities, and it presents an opportunity for land that's not got to be cleared and redeveloped as costly as it would have otherwise. And so I see some real opportunities for those properties to link commercial activity on Airport Freeway with Belknap, and if you had a circulator, that would really help. So I think there's a day that could come when we had something like that on Belknap.
Anything further, Councilmember Lanford? Councilmember Hutchison.
Yes, Ken, is there any possibility along that corridor also, and I've heard it mentioned a couple of times too, about historical preservation in addition to economic development along that corridor?
Sure, it would be another asset that we could uncover during this study as far as, is this something that could have multiple benefits from? I've learned one thing from being involved in studies like this from a mixed-use background, and that is downtown redevelopment. Downtowns can't compete with malls. We can't compete with malls, Belknap and other areas. And so what you have to learn is to figure out what is unique about the area that you're studying and try to find a market niche to play to. And certainly there's unique aspects about Belknap, not the least of which is Birdville and that history. That's pretty significant. And while we do have people in this town that recognize that and promote it, I think it could be promoted much greater. So.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. Economic development to me, seems it takes on a combination of things. One is it's the character and resources of those people that are willing to make an investment in a community. I mean, that drives some of that thing, and I think a study, what part it plays in it, provides an opportunity to make a forum where people can say, we would like this type of development, would like to encourage people that have this type of vision. And there is, where do we want to see this community be in 15, 20, 30 years down the road? Is it just that we want to be able to make enough money to support our families, or do we want to see the see something bigger than that? Do we want to see something for the community that is a blessing to people on down the road? And I think that that's an aspect of the study that maybe wasn't brought out so much, but it's a plea, it's a cry that says, this is the type of thing we want to see developed in the city. Is there anybody that wants to have that vision and partner with the community in terms of the investment, the resources? And the other thing is it's coupled with the land. For instance, Chicago, the character of Chicago came about because it became a central meat market many years ago. You know, where a lot of the meats came and where it got distributed, and it grew from that into a can-do city.
Yeah.
But it had the resources there, Lake Michigan, where it had sea access and all that kind of stuff. Haltom City is a unique piece of land that's long and narrow, but it has a history and it has a purpose. So what we're talking about in this study is bringing out that purpose and vision that we see Haltom City growing into, and really the community sees it growing into. Is that not what that study should accomplish?
Yeah, you know, some good points there. It's a whole lot easier to lead a parade if you've got a vision on where you're going, you know. Right. And we want to lead a parade. We want to get everybody on board and see some real momentum continue to build while we've got some started. And it would just really help if we had a vision of where we're going. The other thing is, if this consensus thing that we're talking about, knowing or at least having a vision of what we want, as the mayor was saying, it tells investors what to expect. You know, when you're developing property, it's the unexpected that you've got to worry about. And am I going to get this approval or not? Okay, time is money, all of those issues. And so if a community has taken the trouble to plan ahead and lay out what their vision is of what they want, that signals those people, those investors, this is what they want. So, hey, and if they're of similar desire, they'll come, you know, as opposed to come and knock us around and, you know, no one has a vision and we end up with what we get. I think that's been a problem for a long time.
Councilmember Branson.
Thank you. I read the previous Belknap study, and I don't recall if it dealt with rooftops. Many times I've heard you explain that we don't get one particular business or another because of our rooftops and our socioeconomics. How can that study help deflect those studies that those individuals do that deal with rooftops and socioeconomic?
What we do is we discover the assets that are right under our nose, okay? Until we do an analysis of the corridor, we don't really know what we've got. We're going to uncover some gems. We're going to uncover some ideas that are very positive, okay? And by doing that and having a body of work that we can point to that deals with those positives, we can build a case for a new vision or a new image, maybe even demographics change for that area. We can maybe bring in some disposable incomes that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Right now, people, you know, they have a fixed image of Haltom City. And you can get a pretty good image of Haltom City just driving through the area, okay?
Right.
If we focus on some positive results and they can see some things happening that changes that imagery, just like the grant that we got to do the landscaping on Belknap. Well, that helps. So we put some of those back to back, and, you know, things can change.
I guess my question goes to, and I think it was Mr. Lanford that was talking about, he was in an airport one time. Wasn't it you? And you mentioned a certain street, and you were talking to like a Starbucks or somebody, and they went, oh, let me look. And then they looked at Haltom City in the particular street, and they went, oh, no, never mind. Was it not you?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, it was someone sitting up here that's not going to fess up.
I've heard a similar story.
But my question is how is that study going to counteract the studies that have already been done by these companies? Small companies, how is it going to counteract what they've already done? Because rooftops seem to be the magic word when we're trying to get somebody.
Yeah, I'm going to probably run counter to what you might expect and tell you from my experience in being in retail development, they don't do studies. Not to the degree that you might think. I mean, Haltom City has an image. It's pretty well known, all right? And image does play into decisions that retailers make. Residential residential developers go where the opportunities are, and if they think there's an opportunity for lower-end housing in that location, that's where they'll go. If you point out some assets that lend themselves, amenities and whatnot, to a higher-end market, and maybe you can attract that, But some of those assets are kind of just below the surface. And I think a study like this would uncover them, and it might bring some of this coordinated effort and reinforcement of some of these positives. That's what it's going to take to change attitudes and minds and history.
With that means, I don't want to imply I am very much for the Belknap study, and actually I thought, and it's interesting that you mentioned academics, because I thought, and I'm going to call them kids because they were young enough to be my children when they did it, the graduate students at UTA that did it really thought outside the box on a lot of these things. They had some really creative and unique perceptions of some things that could happen along Belknap. And I would like to encourage the other council members to get a hold of one of those studies and read it if you have the opportunity. It may get you thinking and get some other people thinking too.
Yeah,
I think there's some copies around. Maybe the library has a copy of it, and I think there's a couple around City Hall somewhere.
I've got the library's copy, so don't go to the library.
Okay, well, the library doesn't have the copy. The branch across the hall in Mr. Muir's office has the copy of it, but it's really interesting. It's great to see how these people thought outside the box, and I would hope that we have some citizens that could think outside the box.
Yeah,
too.
I wouldn't mean to imply or diss the UTA study in any way,
And I
or
didn't take it that
academics
way.
either, because you do need to think outside the box. I
These
guess
kids thought way outside the box.
Yeah, but you also need to have some what I call catalysts or pilot projects that are very doable now to show some success, so you can build and take the steps. You have to have a bridge to get there.
Well, I would hope, and when we do, should we choose to do this new study, that we would maybe contain them a little more than we did the UTA group, so they don't get quite so far out as they got on some, even though it sounds like a lot of fun stuff down there. Maybe we don't get quite as far out as they got, but.
Yeah, and not to, can't think of the word, not discredit the UTA study. It is a bit dated now.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it was.
And it's
I think they
very
did their
young in
stuff
ideas.
in '96 or '97, something like that. So it does need to, if for nothing else, just update it.
Yeah, and it's very young in many of the ideas. And young, I mean 18 to 25-year-old kind of young.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further? Councilmember Sutton?
Yeah, I just want to thank the mayor for bringing this up, because we all hear from different people out in the community, and part of bringing this up is to start a dialogue, because there's people in the community that really, they live in a nice neighborhood, they've lived in a nice neighborhood for much of their life, and they don't really see why we need to be putting any emphasis on development within the city. And I can understand and appreciate that perspective. But there's other people in the city that have begun to catch a vision for wanting something more for this city. And we've got to live together in this city. And I think that's part of what this dialogue is about, is to begin starting dialoguing with each other, talking with each other about where we can best compromise on doing these things. I think that I feel very strongly that if we don't do anything, if we let things just go as they are, I've seen it in Chicago, where some of the suburbs in Chicago, they didn't react to what was happening around them, and they ended up being problems. The crime became very unbearable. People moved out. The demographics changed significantly to the fact where they became a ghetto, and that was over a course of many years that happened. And of course, you can study cities like that to see what happens to cities that are totally enclosed by other areas. And I think we can learn from that. Now, we can ignore those lessons, and that's fine, and it may not turn out that way. But if we don't look at some of these lessons and figure out what may happen to Haltom City in 15 years, are we really serving those that are going to come after us? And I think this is a little bit about what are we providing for the next generation? What are we doing for the people that come after us? That's what this study is about. It's not necessarily to benefit us. It's not necessarily benefit me, it's to benefit the people down the road and to make this community the type of place that we can all be proud of.
Just to tag on to your point, as the mayor pointed out, Fort Worth and their neighborhood associations certainly doing a lot of stuff on the south and the west side, but on the north and the east, Richland Hills, North Richland Hills, they've been doing their own study for quite a while, and we're here in the middle. And there's going to be, like you pointed out, it could be left behind, could be a hole in that area. It's I think to a degree you almost owe it to the citizens to at least take a look at it and see what's there.
Well, I think any vision that is cast by this generation will certainly pay off for the next generation to follow on something of this undertaking. But I don't want us to not cast an aggressive vision, because if you look to see what's happening in Fort Worth with the Trinity River development on the immediate north side, we're not that far away. Also, with what they're doing along Belknap, that's right in our back door. And I know the neighborhood associations and business associations can do tremendous things. Just look at the role the neighborhood association played in getting the Walmart just right outside our door down on Beach at Airport Freeway. They had a vision, and they mobilized the stakeholders, and they got a lot done. And I believe the same type of process can happen in Haltom City, and we can have some very positive, good things come as a result of this. Members of the council, anyone else with a comment before I open the floor to members of the audience? Okay, there being none, we have members of the audience who would like to address the council. Mr. Williams? We're very interested in what you have to say, all of you in the audience and those who are watching on TV. We need to hear what you have to say as we give consideration to this.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. My name is John Williams, and I haven't moved since the first time I spoke. So, I was here during the study, the Belknap study in 1998, and it in fact started in the spring of 1998, right after I was elected, because I voted against it. Because I think that a person could drive down Belknap at that time and tell what was wrong with Belknap. But like I said the other day about y'all's trip to paradise, there's good things come from that, and there was good things that come from this study. One of them is, like Mr. Flynn said a while ago, the landscaping that the Beautification Board got for us along Belknap. And also the former city manager, Bill Eisen, was a part of that. I think that has added a lot to the area, all the way from the school, the old Haltom High School, all the way out to Beach Street. I'm happy that the Asians community have decided to start building buildings out on the west end. I don't know how many of y'all go down Belknap on a regular basis, but they've done a tremendous job with the structures that they put up, and they put them up with pride. We've got some places on Belknap that need to be tore down. We've got some that are causing crime, some that some motels that are less than desirable. I've heard some members of the council, I've heard some members of the P&Z board say we don't need any more of that. The citizens will demand what you need. You don't have to tell them what you need or what you don't need. If you need a product and someone puts that business in and it's successful, then you need it. If they put it in and it's not successful, then they don't need it. You know, the market will do that. Denton Highway is an example of some bad planning back before any of us were ever involved in city council. They built houses, the sides of them abutting a state highway. I don't know how many cities that you can go through and see that are designed like that. Grocery store, give me a good grocery store on Denton Highway. We got grocery stores that, you know, I guess there's a need for them because they're still open. I personally have taken a tack against the major grocery store at the corner of Denton Highway and Broadway its condition that it's in. Now, I understand they're fixing to spend a lot of money on that. I got an email from corporate office, Kroger's, telling me they're going to spend $1 million renovating that store. Now, we were talking about the library a while ago, $50 a foot, or $100 or $150 a foot. $1 million in renovating a store that size is not much renovation. When you go fixing something that's old and trying to bring it up to today's standards, that money won't go very far. We need, and I challenge you, the mayor and the council, to go out and get some major chain, even if it's Kroger's that we have, and build us a new store somewhere. You know, Haltom City deserves a new store. I'm not sure exactly the age of that store. I remember where the old Army Navy is. That used to be a Piggly Wiggly store. Down where the Sack and Save is on Denton Highway in Webster, that used to be a Piggly Wiggly. So we had multiple chain stores in this city at one time. Safeway had 2 stores in the city at one time. That needs to be marketed. I don't know if our economic development director, he's still here, so I'm going to get on him a little bit. These are some things that we need to approach. Ms. Branson a while ago spoke about rooftops. Yes, when these people put in places, they look at rooftops. And I feel like probably Haltom City is suffering from the white rooftop syndrome. And that's not degrading to the city of Haltom City. The houses in Haltom City that are under $100,000 in value usually have a white roof on them. And those houses, they're $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. They don't have the disposable income that the people in South Lake and Colleyville have. You know, they'll spend as much on their groceries and entertainment this year as a lot of our people here will pay on their houses. So you have to get something. If you have lemons, you make lemonade. So we need to find out what will go on Belknap. And one of the studies, when they did the study in 1998, I think one of the things, and I'll have to take up for the students that did that, I think they did a very in-depth study. A lot of our medicine comes from researches from schools, they're academics. So, you know, not to take anything from them. But what they weren't aware of when they brought the study to us is the city of Haltom City did not own all the property between Beach Street and the creek. It was private sector owns it. And you can't take private sector and make them put on their property what you want. Now, you can limit them through zoning. But if you'll look down through Belknap Street and Denton Highway, we have a lot of buildings, or a lot of lots that are vacant that had buildings on them in the past. Buildings burned, buildings fell down, they pushed them over or whatever, and this property is leased property through the Haltom Trust and is not able to be sold. It's going to be hard to get someone to build something on some property that's leased when they can't buy the property themselves. Back in the 50s, you know, those were 100-year leases, or even back before that. Now the leases are shorter term leases. At some point, this property will be able to be sold, but I don't think it's going to be in our 15, 20-year window that we're looking at. We're tearing down buildings down on Midway Street. Just got through, I think the board voted to tear down the old rest home or whatever it was down there. That's probably good to tear it down because it's a dilapidated building. But go down Belknap and make a left on Denton Highway and look to the left and look at those old buildings sitting there, wooden buildings, glass fronts in them, and they're not being used. You know, if those were leveled and had something that, now these students told us when they brought this study to us, where the Haltom Theater was, they were really thinking about maybe revitalizing that theater, putting a single picture show back in there, and making a food court back in behind that building where all that empty property is. That would be a good idea. I mean, I work on 28th Street every day. I am sick of grifts. They got good food, but my son and the boy that works for me, they say, well, you want grifts or you want Jack in the Box? Well, you know, those are two fine choices if you want fast food. But, you know, I work 7 days a week down there, 6.5 to 7 days. And so I would like to have something to where I'd like to have an A&W drive-in root beer stand where you could drive in and have, you know, order your deal kind of like the Sonic deal. There's some good opportunities on Belknap, and I don't know if a study is, you know, we know what we need. We need retail there. We know what we got to work with. The Asian community is expanding. The Hispanic community is expanding. If you look on Denton Highway, you have a Hispanic grocery store up there in the old Stanley Keller and Denton Highway grocery store. If none of y'all been in there, y'all need to go in there. That's a whole different type of food. But that is, I mean, they got a booming business. They've got the need for it. And so we need to look at what we have to look forward to, look at our community. You know, we're not South Lake, we're not Colleyville, but we're still proud. You know, I don't live here because I have to. I live here because I want to. And I think that most of y'all are the same. And I think these people out here with the white roofs in them, I think they live here because they want to. A lot of them, you know, it's what they can afford. And, you know, they don't want to live beyond their means. So if we can take this study, I challenge, like Ms. Bransom said, if you don't have a copy, get a copy of it. I've had mine for 7 years, and I had it at fingertips when I went to get it this afternoon. I still go to it on a regular basis and read it. But they did talk about landscaping. They did talk about landscaping existing businesses, which when we did the C5 rezoning, required landscaping on that. And Mr. Rust was here earlier talking about building those houses. He's doing a tremendous job in Haltom City to set forth and build a brand new house in an old territory down on Haltom Road before you get to Airport Freeway on the left-hand side. Someone is building a brand new brick house amongst all them old houses. And if you do this, it will catch on. People next door will think, well, I need to do something to my house. Not all of them, but 90% of the people you're looking at, you know, it will be a magnet. It'll drag them to do something better. And when they start doing something better in their home, they're going to have to buy something to do it with. They're going to have to buy gas to go get it, and they're going to get hungry, and they're going to have to eat at Griff's or Jack in the Box. Give me another one for it. I gave 2 of them plugs. Any of your hamburger stands, restaurants, we've got some good restaurants here in town, and we got some good places. I saw the city manager pulling out of a restaurant today, so I know he ate here locally. You didn't know I was watching you, but I did. Hop Brows has some real good food. But, you know, we need to decide what we got, work together. I told the mayor, Calvin White, by email the other day, and I told Mr. Muir both, I'm withdrawing. I'm not going to be involved. I told them both I wouldn't be making any more council meetings, but after I saw the Belknap study, if it's something I feel like it's going to affect me directly, I'll come up here. I'm not going to criticize you. I'm going to try to help you with the knowledge that I have. But, you know, before we spend a lot of money doing a research on Belknap, you know, we might do a survey here in town. Now, we did a survey. I loaned Mr. Flint's assistant my survey they had back in 2000. I don't know if y'all can get a copy of that, but they sent a survey out to about 300 people and asked them what was wrong with Haltom City, what was right with Haltom City. 70% of them said they had too many car lots. I don't know how they get to and from work, you know, but it's, there was good things coming from that and bad. So I would challenge you to get a copy of the survey and get a copy of the study before you decide to spend any more money on a study. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you, Mr. Williams. And that idea of getting a copy of that study and looking at it as you have done, Councilmember Bransom, is a great idea. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council on this? He who hesitates may be lost. If you want to speak now, or well, I won't say forever hold your peace. That we are interested in what you have to say, though.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Ray Eklund. Belknap's been of particular interest to me in this past year. I spent a lot of time on it. A group of citizens and I went over to meet with a well-known engineer and a architect and some people that are doing some revitalization over on TCU and Berry Street areas, 2 different areas, in January of this year to talk about revitalization and how to organize people. We had a meeting at the church last month, and we invited people, and many of y'all were there, to talk about revitalization and the importance of that, and about organizing groups to help accomplish that. So I've been taking notes, so I may kind of jump around a little bit because the notes kind of jump around, but I would like to cover these things. One of which is I think it's important, especially as you come into your budget time now, if this is the goal that the mayor set for us for this coming year, is to put it in your budget as a priority. For example, the city of Fort Worth and these strong neighborhood associations that you referenced have an umbrella with the city leadership and a way to get information back and forth between them. And they actually have a, for lack of a better term, a liaison office. I think it's more detailed than that. They put on important things for neighborhoods, and they encourage and grow them through their efforts in the office. And one of their members came and spoke to us at that meeting at the church. So I would like for you to consider that. I would like for you to consider, as you come to your budget, how can you do this? Yeah, we can hire a study done. I kind of agree with John. Personally, I'm in the midst of collecting photographs of every property on Belknap. I hope to have that done in the next month or so, and so we can have a reference that we can reach on the computer. But when it comes to revitalization and rebuilding things, the first thing people have to have, whether they're going to live there or shop there or anything else, is you have to feel safe. It has to look safe, and you have to feel safe. It may be lighting, it may be cleanliness, it may be a cop on every corner, right? But those things, you have to feel safe, or you won't get out of your car. So all the rest of the studies and all those things won't do you a bit of good if you don't make the people feel safe. It has to be attractive, and what you want to accomplish is a sense of place. You've come to Haltom City, you've come to Belknap, and you've come to a safe sense of place. Unique. It could be unique Asian. It could be unique lots of different other kinds of ways. Right? But it needs. We would like to be unique. Back to the idea of Starbucks. I don't know what Starbucks charges. I think it's $5 or $7 for coffee. That may not be our thing. And they have standards, and they spend a lot of money when they come to town to build their place, I suppose. But I found a town that markets, and when you go to their website, it actually has Starbucks with a red circle and a line through it, because they realize that they are not the corporate mentality, and they market around it. So if you were to go to that town, you wouldn't find a Starbucks, you'd find Mr. and Mrs. Coffee Shop, and it would be unique, and that's why you would go to their town. I'm going to try to go there on vacation next month, so I'll report back and tell you what I find. But as we go through these things, the stakeholders, we heard the stakeholders on Belknap. Some of those stakeholders just don't have the vision. I drive up and down. I can name them, but I hate to embarrass them. But they're surviving for years with a quality of business that kills their neighbor's business. That their business looks so bad, and they're still got the door open, that personally I wouldn't open up a store next to them. If I have a product to sell, that's not what I want to attract. So when we talk about stakeholders, we're also going to have to talk about the citizens in Haltom City all the way up to the north edge up here on Western Center, because although they feel, well, that's the south end, I don't shop there, I don't deal down there, it does, in fact, benefit everybody in this city as that corridor revitalizes. One, it will bring our name back to where it belongs, so we don't have this image problem. I've heard more than one of the people in this room tell me that Haltom City is a, quote, hard sell. I think it's a matter of attitude. Okay? We got the best location in Tarrant County. Okay? We got the lowest tax rate, almost lowest. Right? We have lots of good opportunities here. Right? So I don't think it's a hard sell. Right? I prefer to think of it as an opportunity. So I think we need, and I don't know why we haven't captured this vision of marketing our history. The Birdville history goes all the way back. Our buildings, we have buildings down here on the corner of Denton Highway and Belknap. They were built in the 30s. They're still attractive. they need a little washing or whatnot, okay? But we need to protect those, and we can do that, if I'm not mistaken, from the idea of an overlay district to say, you can't build something stupid next to these nice historic buildings, and you can't tear them down either. So I think we need to consider those things with legislation from your offices to make sure we do that. As we move forward with this idea of safety first, you got to make people feel safe, then you got to look at the infrastructure. We're talking about building 2 new houses down here, and I consider that area to be Oak Knoll, whether it is officially or not. But down there, they're talking about infrastructure problems of 2-inch water lines and those kinds of things. The city needs to know in itself what we need to do to make sure we can reach these goals, right? If a guy wants to come in here and build a couple of commercial buildings, can we support him? Can we give him fire protection? Can we do those things that we need to do? Lighting, I think as we consider these things, I think as simple as changing the light fixtures on Belknap, I know they belong to the state. I know it's going to be a lot of big fighting. But if you can make them look nice, like Victorian style or one of these older kind of 1930 styles, you start creating that sense of place. It's a few dollars. It may take us a while to get from one end to the other, right? But like my street, they told me they could not rebuild my street. The council at the time, many years ago, said they couldn't rebuild my street because it cost too much. And what they finally came to the conclusion was they would take it in 3 of our bond grants. It took 3 years to get it done, but by golly, they got it done. Right? And then the street popped. Then things started happening after they completed that. So those things are important. My motto is borrow from success. Carter Burgess, and I got the copy from our planning director here, they produce a quarterly booklet, for lack of a better term, very informative. They know what they're talking about. You can look in there and see these projects. The Urban Land Institute, you could spend all day at the Urban Land Institute reading about one project after the other in this country. I have a personal collection of resources about these kinds of things. I'm very interested in it. I'm just, unfortunately, I haven't inherited, $100 million, and I look like Ross Perot Jr. But I know what we can accomplish on Belknap. I think y'all know what we can accomplish on Belknap. What we have to do is start working together through this coordinated effort, and I was very happy to hear that we're going to do that. I would like to encourage the city to think about a staff position or a part of a staff position, to say, okay, one day a week, go down there and talk to those businessmen. I visited with them this last week. I'm surprised they weren't here to talk about, we saw their meeting that was in the paper on Tuesday last month about their concern about crime, those things. We need to follow up on those things and make sure that the needs of these communities and these business people are met. So as we move forward with this idea of the plan, I think we can simplify it in lots of ways, okay? But it's important that you commit what you can commit, which is time and some financial resources from the city to build on this vision. It's more than just talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Mulholland.
Well, Mayor, Ray kind of gave some big general ideas there. I know it's getting late, so I'm just going to go through a quick list of just some little things. Because the big things are all made up of components. There's all these things that are out there that can be improved. There's several different things that can be added in, but they're all going to link together, and that's what's going to make this work. Just the UTA study that's out there, rather than starting from scratch, from ground one, I'd like to see an update on it. I'd like to see it brought up to date. Yes, it is out of date, no doubt about it, but it's an okay framework. And I would be willing to work with someone. I've gone through and made PDFs of all the pages. I need to link them, but I'd be glad to work with someone to get that put onto a city website that everyone could access. Architectural standards. There needs to be a cohesiveness. Yeah, uniqueness is something that needs to be done, but there need to be standards put in place. If we're talking about mixed-use development, you need 2 floors for that. You need one along the street level that would be appropriate for commercial use, and then above that for residential use. If you're going to get people living there where they work, or people living there, we've got location. This place is within 5 miles of downtown Fort Worth. Downtown Fort Worth is taking off. We should be able to offer something to people that can't afford to live downtown, you know, $300,000 condominiums, but could live here much more affordably, but there's got to be a decent life here. There's got to be things to do on the street. Wide sidewalks. Ray hit on the lighting. And there are ways of working outside the box there. You know, is there adequate cell phone coverage in the city? I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. If there's not, why not allow cell phone towers to go up along there and put moonlighting so you don't actually need street lights? Austin did this years ago. They don't use it anymore, but this is something that could be used again. Over in far west side Fort Worth, the extension of Camp Bowie West, I believe, they're putting in, they're not putting in bricks on the streets, but they're putting in textured concrete that's colored and looks like bricks. Okay, this would give more, kind of build that sense of place that I think Kent was talking about a little bit ago. How about, I know this is years ago, maybe a real old-fashioned thing, but at one time they had penny drives, maybe it'd be quarter drives now, or dollar drives, with kids in school to raise money to put a statue of Captain Bird in a prominent place along Belknap Street. Transit, no doubt about it. We need public transit in this town. We've got public transit on the west side over in Fort Worth. We've got it on the west side over in Fort Worth, and to the east of us over in Richland Hills. They have transit there also. It's a natural. We could have a line put in. If we negotiate it, we can get a lot less than what they're asking for. I would think. Again, I've never negotiated for transit routes, so I know what they would want to get, I imagine, but I think we could get it for a lot less. It's a natural. At some point, rebuilding the street, you know, as the taxes go along there, TIF districts like they use in Fort Worth, to rebuild the street with new utilities underground, with probably about time for new sewer lines there, especially if you're putting in new development. They're going to need that at some point. This is thinking on down the line, but that's enough to get started with for right now. But you know, this was mentioned a little while ago. If this side of town we're talking about is going to attract people to live there, they need a high school. There used to be a high school right there at Carson and Belknap. There needs to be a high school there now. Richland Hills, or North Richland Hills, excuse me, got out and made a lot of noise, and guess what? If you've read the paper, they're going to rebuild that school. They're adding on to that tax issue. We need what they're calling Shannon Center to be Haltom High School again. So let me just leave you with that for right now.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on this subject? Okay, there being none, Councilmember Branson.
Thank you. And this is probably for Mr. Muir. Mr. Mulholland mentioned that he had a PDF where he could put the study out if we had space. Do we have space to put it out there?
Yes.
Is that something we might consider doing so that others can read the study so that they know what we're talking about and what's been suggested by this group? Okay.
Okay, members of the council, anything else on this Belknap corridor study tonight? Well, what I'd like to do in summary, Mr. Muir, is if you think it to be appropriate, At the next council meeting, let's have the Belknap corridor study on the agenda, and you and your staff bring forth some kind of recommendation on how we might proceed forward with that, or do we need to have action by the council to decide if we want to proceed with that? What are your thoughts about our next step?
Well, I don't think the council needs to take action to direct that. I mean, if I'd like a consensus of the council if that's what they're wanting to do, but I don't know if they need to take action on it or not. You want me to bring back an action item in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure what. I guess I need better clarification as far as what you're wanting the action item to be. If it's to go ahead and proceed with a study, I'm gonna need more time than 2 weeks to pull something together. It's because there's a funding issue. There's who's going to be doing it, and there's going to be a process. It's going to have to be that I would prefer to follow, and ascertaining who that's going to be. But I haven't heard any objection to doing a study, so I'm assuming that silence that you're supportive of doing a study. Is that accurate? I guess your silence is affirmation.
Tom?
So when you said that, Councilmember Lanford's light came on, so may we interrupt you?
Sure.
At this time, Mr. Muir? Yes, Councilmember Lanford?
Well, I was just gonna ask that if we could gather some more information. I don't think that it's critical that we authorize a study, in 2 weeks. But I would like to become familiar with the well, not the I've got one of those. Yeah, and I'd share it with somebody if they want me to. But the survey that Mr. Williams mentioned earlier, I've not seen that, and that might be of some interest.
Okay.
I don't know. At least it seems pertinent.
Yeah.
Could we attempt to round that up and just okay?
Okay, so what I'd suggested may be a little bit more aggressive than we're ready to take as far as the next step at this point, but to start accumulating things like that, and the rest of us who have not read the 98 study, we might, between now and the next council meeting, want to take a look at that. Can you provide?
Yeah, I'll try and provide a copy.
Okay.
Does everybody know what we're talking about? Well, know what we're talking about. Have you seen what we're talking about?
Well, Mr. Muir, if you could get it back to Leslie here, maybe we could check it out of the library too. I don't know.
Tongue-in-cheek statement. Councilmember Sutton, and then we'll get back to Mr. Muir with his thought he had a moment ago.
Real briefly, just how this dovetails with maybe our land use plan, the scope, how much money are we talking about, and maybe an objective would be a good product to have the next time we start to talk about this. I don't think that you can do an effective study in a short amount of time, of 2 weeks, but I think you can put together an objective, how you expect it to dovetail with our current products that we have, like our land use plan and things like that.
Good thoughts. Now, I thought you said something about you hadn't heard anything to the negative about proceeding, and their lights came on, so I thought maybe we might need to stop the process. So please continue with what you were saying.
Well, what I was getting at is I'm taking your silence as affirmation to proceed with this, and so I'll do that. And I think Jim, Mr. Sutton brings up a good point as far as tying in with the land use plan, and certainly clarifying some objectives of what we need to do. I think before we even embark on who we're going to get to do this or what kind of studies we're going to be doing, we certainly need to have that clarified.
Okay, I think we're through with our discussion of the Belknap corridor study for tonight. I don't see any lights to the contrary. We move forward to item number 12, resignations of board members. Do we have any resignations? Okay, there being none, item 13 is the appointment and reappointment to boards and commissions. Councilmember Holcomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several. I can list all these or name all these at once. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and the only way we would break those out it would and take action on each one separately is if a member of the council requested, but please feel free to just read your entire list.
Okay. For fire services, I would like to nominate Mark Wilson for reappointment. Beautification Board would be Mary Spencer. For the Library Board would be Travis Royal. For the Sexually Oriented Board of Appeals would be Sandra Sellers. For the Parks and Rec Board would be Steve Milius. Forgive me, Steve. I figured I would butcher that. My apologies. For Planning and Zoning, I would like to, actually for Zoning Board of Adjustments, I would like to nominate Mr. Wayne Iverson for appointment in place 2. And to fill his position on the P&Z Board, I would like to nominate Mr. Wayne Moody.
Okay, members of the council, you have heard the nominations for the appointments from place 2. If you will vote at this time, your pleasure regarding ratification. And that passes by unanimous vote. Councilmember Holcomb, you had your light on again, please.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. If it's appropriate, I'd like to make a comment regarding the boards. Of course, it's as everybody knows, I've been in here a little over a year now, and when I started, the council had placed me on the Zoning Board of Adjustments as the council liaison, and that's when I had first met the chairperson at the time, Mr. Bob Watkins. I know he served a great deal of time for several years, I believe the better part of the last decade, if I'm correct. And I just wanted to thank him, not only personally, but on behalf of the citizens for his time served. I certainly learned a great deal in the short amount of time that we served together. And I appreciate the respect that he gave me in that time. So, Bob, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Holcomb. Councilmember Sutton.
Have 2 council liaison positions. These are council liaison positions as authorized by ordinance of the city that the mayor pro tem needs to do every 2 years. And so what I'd like to do is for those 2 positions, the planning and zoning and the Zoning Board of Adjustment. There are more nominations to come in other areas, but I think tonight I need to take care of these 2. For Zoning Board of Adjustments, I'd like to, which is a council position, I'd like to nominate Diane Branson. And for Planning and Zoning, I'd like to put Chris Holcomb in that place, if that's all right.
Okay, you have the recommendations from the Mayor Pro Tem regarding the liaisons. If you'll register your desire about ratification, and it is a unanimous vote. Do you have other appointments to make, Councilmember Sutton?
Not at this time. I will probably next meeting.
We move then to item number 14, the attendance requirements. As I mentioned at the beginning of the council meeting, Councilmember Dale Clark is a public safety officer at DFW Airport, was not able to get away tonight from his job assignment, and we do need for the council to give consideration regarding excusing that absence. And Councilmember Holcomb, your light was on first, and then Councilmember Hutchison.
I move to approve to excuse.
Okay,
I think.
Councilmember Hutchison.
I'll second that excuse for Dale Clark.
Okay, Councilmember Branson.
That was for a second.
Okay, if you will, register your vote in this regard. And it is a unanimous vote. All of the items on the regular agenda have been addressed by the council. The council will move at this time into executive session as authorized by Section 551 of the Texas Government Code, Section .074, .072, and .071, and will return to this location to take action on any item if any action is to be taken. The time is 10:44. The council is reconvening open session following executive session. No action to be taken on any items discussed in executive session. The council stands therefore adjourned.